Letter from Dachau. This first picture here is an American soldier distributing cigarettes to prisoners within Dachau. Letter from Dachau. First Lieutenant William J. Cowling. The first American soldier to enter Dachau describes his experience in a letter to his family. Over 30,000 prisoners and 100 SS guards remained in the camp when it was surrendered to Lieutenant Cowling. April 28, 1945. Dear folks, boy oh boy, am I having a heck of a time trying to find time to write. We are really moving. My days have been consisting of getting up between 6:30 and 7:30, eating, throwing my stuff in a jeep, and taking off. When visiting the regiments and sometimes the battalions, and then heading for a new CP, by the time we get into the new CP and set up, it is 11 o'clock at night or later. And I am so tired I just hit the sack, so I haven't really had much time to write. I received the fruit cake the other day, and boy, it was good. That package contained all the right things. I have lost my chapstick, and my lips were chapped, so it really came in handy. Well, I was interrupted at this point, and it is now the 30th of April, and the very first minute I have had to write. Since I started this letter, I have had the most, I suppose you would say, exciting, horrible, and at the same time wonderful experience I have ever had, or probably ever will have. When I tell it to you, probably won't believe all the details. I knew when I heard such stories back in the States, I never believed them. And now, even after seeing with my own eyes, it is hard for me to believe it. Well, to go on with the story, as you know, we have been moving very rapidly, and oftentimes the boss and I get into the towns just about the same time the frontline troops do. Yesterday, we started out to locate a company and a unit advancing down a road. En route, we learned from civilians and 2 newspaper people that just off the main road was a concentration camp of Dachau, oldest, largest, and most notorious camp in Germany. These newspaper people were going up to see the camp, so we decided to go up too. We ride in a jeep with a guard out ahead of the boys, and we were several hundred yards ahead as we approached the camp. The first thing we came to was a railroad track leading out of the camp with a lot of open boxcars on it. As we crossed the track and looked back into the cars, the most horrible sight I have ever seen up to that time met my eyes. The cars were loaded with dead bodies. Most of them were naked and all of them skin and bones. Honest, their legs and arms were only a couple of inches around, and they had no buttocks at all. Many of the bodies had bullet holes in the back of their heads. It made us sick to our stomach, and so mad we could do nothing but clench our fists. I couldn't even talk. We then moved on toward the camp, and my jeep was still several hundred yards ahead. As we approached the main gate, a German officer and a civilian wearing an International Red Cross band and carrying a white flag came out. We immediately filed out, and I was just hoping he would make a funny move so I could hit the trigger of my Tommy gun. He didn't, however, and when he arrived abreast of us, he asked for an American officer. I informed him he was talking to one, and he said he wished to surrender the camp to me. About that time, the general arrived and got the story from the German lieutenant that the camp was still manned by German guards who were armed but had orders not to shoot us, but only to keep the prisoners in check. Well, about that time, somebody started shooting from over on our left flank, and we ducked but made the Germans stand in front of us. Finally, the fire let up, and we sent one of the guards back for a company of infantry. The newspaper people said we were going on into camp, and I got permission to go on with them with my guard, leaving the others with the general. We went through one gate and spotted some Germans in a tower. I hollered in German for them to come to meet me, and they did. I sent them back to the guards and the general and got out on the front of the newspaper people's jeep and headed for the gate. A man lay dead just in front of the gate, a bullet through his head. One of the Germans that we had taken lifted him out of the way, and we dismounted and went through the gate into a large cement square. About 800 squares surrounded by low black barracks, and the whole works enclosed by barbed wire. When we entered the gate, not a soul was in sight. Then suddenly people, if you could call them that, came from all directions. They were dirty, starved skeletons with torn, tattered clothes. And they screamed and hollered and cried. They ran up and grabbed us, myself and the newspaper people, and kissed our hands and feet. And all of them tried to touch us. They grabbed us and tossed us into the air, screaming at the top of their lungs. I finally managed to pull myself free and get to the gate and shut it so they could not get out. Then I felt something brush my shoulder and turned to the left of the 2 block houses guarding the gate to find a white flag fluttering square in my face, and on the end of it inside the house, 8 Germans. I looked around the house and entered. I got the same question, "Are you an American officer?" and said yes. They turned over their arms, pistols, and rifles to me, and I told them to sit tight. I then went back outside and sent my driver to get the Jeep. Then I went back to the Germans and took their arms and sent the pistols to my Jeep. I gave all away but 2. When I came back out, the general was there, and the people inside the enclosure were all in the large square shouting and crying. Then a terrible thing happened. Some of them, in their frenzy, charged the barbed wire fence to get out and embrace us and touch us. Immediately, they were killed by an electric charge running through the fence. I personally saw 3 die that way. Our troops arrived about that time and took the rest of the guards, Germans, who during all this time had remained in the towers around the prison. A number of them, and I sincerely regret that I took the 8 prisoners that I did after a trip through the camp, which I shall describe in a minute. Well, the general attempted to get the thing organized, and an American mayor who had been held in the camp since September came out, and we sent him up as head of the prisoners. He soon picked me to quiet the prisoners down and explain to them that they must stay in the camp until we could get them deloused and proper food and medical care. Several newspaper people arrived about that time and wanted to go through the camp. So we took them through with a guide furnished by the prisoners. The first thing we came to were piles and piles of clothing, shoes, pants, shirts, coats, etc. Then we went into a room with a table with flowers on it and some soap and towels. Another door with the word showers led off of this, and upon going through this room, it appeared to be a shower room, but instead of water, gas came out, and in 2 minutes, the people were dead. Next, we went next door to 4 large ovens where they cremated the dead. Then we were taken to piles of dead. There were from 2 to 50 people in a pile, all naked, starved, and dead. There must have been about 1,000 dead in all. Then we went through a building where 50 men were guarded in a room the size of your kitchen. There were hundreds of typhus cases, and all through the camp, men cheered us and tried to touch us. Incidentally, many of the dead and living showed signs of horrible beatings and torture. It is unbelievable how any human can treat others as they were treated. One wasted little man came up and touched my sleeve and kissed my hand. He spoke perfect English, and I asked him if he were American. He said no, Jewish, and that he was one of the very few left, that thousands had been killed. He had been there 6 years. He was 28 years old and looked to be 60 years old. The Germans I took prisoner are very fortunate they were taken before I saw the camp. I will never take another German prisoner, armed or unarmed. How can they expect to do what they have done and simply say, "I quit," and go scot-free? I know now why our men kick and abuse the German prisoners. They are not fit to live. Well, that's my story, and a day I will never forget. It will get a lot of publicity, and you may see General Linden's name connected to Dachau. But you can know in your minds that it was your son who was the first American soldier to enter the famous camp of Dachau. I know that sounds like bragging, but I only say it because it is true. And I know that the story won't come out that way, but several thousand prisoners will remember me. Incidentally, there were 32,000 prisoners in that camp. They were Polish, Jewish, French, German, and even American. Well, I must stop now. The next time I write, I hope I can say that I got my first German, and I don't mean prisoner. Oh, the Germans a lot now. Incidentally, you are griping about my going to the South Pacific. I have only been in the Army a couple of years. Some of these people were in the hellhole of Dachau for years. If I spend 10 years in the Army during war, I will never go through what those people go through. Even if I were killed, I would be lucky compared to those people. So if you still feel the jitters, remember the people of Dachau and think how lucky I am no matter what happens. We will write, and I will give you the rest of the story when I get home. Love, Bill.